All right. Hello. Welcome to this interview podcast thingy. Um, my name is Ethan De Leon. Pronouns he, him, his. I am a fourth year electrical engineering student, and I am this year's secretary for FILAH.
My name is Bianca Nunez. Sorry, I use she, her pronouns. And I am a third year biopsychology major. And I am this year's academics chair for FILAH.
My name is Michaela Rodriguez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a third year sociology major at UC Davis. And I am an intern this year for FILAH. And I guess I'll pass it on to our guest.
Hi, I'm the guest. My name is Rachel Lee Millena, and my pronouns are she, her, and I, didn't go to UC Davis, but my dad and my sister and Ethan did. So good for them.
All right. so, Rachel, why don't you introduce us to what your career is, what you do?
So I am currently I'm a freelance theatrical stage manager. I say currently loosely because of the pandemic. But I feel more comfortable using that label now because I just got a very small job offer, but like for a show here in LA, to be part of their team, which is exciting as the state is reopening again. I get to claim that I'm a theater person more and more. I studied theater at UCLA. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in theater. I'm a stage manager, but I didn't specialize in that track because I didn't take drafting, so I couldn't declare production. So I graduated under the integrated studies track, which no one really knows what that means, including the department itself. So it's really fun to be a part of. I'm based in LA now because I went to school here, but for the last couple of years, including at the beginning of the pandemic, I was working in Portland, Oregon, because in 2018, I was an apprentice at a small regional theater in Portland and made some connections and then worked there for a while and then decided that I kind of need to sun and all of my friends to be happy. So I moved back. I could probably go into defining what my job is because I'm so used to being like around industry people and people like who work in entertainment that I can equate it to other things. But the stage manager is the person who manages the stage. You're a liaison between actors and all of the creative and administrative team. You run rehearsals, like make sure every break is taken on time, keep track of everything that goes on for a show. During the run of show, if you're a production stage manager or the calling stage manager, you'll call the cues that happen during the show. If you're an assistant stage manager, sometimes you're a deck stage manager, you'll be running around backstage managing either side. And I like ASMing more than PSMing so far in my life because I love to be hands-on and I don't really like sitting around and waiting for cues.
Sounds a bit stressful.
It's a lot stressful. It's really fun though.
All right.
To go off of that a little bit, how might you generally describe your typical day?
So a typical day in rehearsal, depending on when the rehearsal would be, the first show that I did, taking my Portland Playhouse apprenticeship as an example, because I was an ASM for all of the main stage shows there. The first show that I did in the fall, the rehearsals were daytime and they went usually 5-6 hours or so. And then as you get closer to the show, they're longer days. So rehearsals and then decompress and then rehearsals again. It's a really grueling schedule no matter what stage of the show you're at because your only day off is usually Monday if you're working in professional theater. So something I've had to learn the hard way as an early career like theater professional is how to take time for myself. So, and it's also fun to think about now because it feels like that's all I've been doing lately in addition to job hunting. But when I would be working, I would try really hard to like carve out an hour or two to read a book before I went into like going over my notes for the day to go into rehearsal and then being in rehearsal. And for a stage manager or like a member of the stage management team, your rehearsal days don't start and end when everyone else shows up. You're there an hour before to prep, and you're there usually at least an hour after to clean up and then make sure everything is ready for the next day. And the more I talk about it, the more like difficult and awful it sounds, and the more I like miss doing it, because this is what I trained to do for 4 years and I haven't been doing it in over a year. So I'm really excited to get back to work. But I'm also like, dang, you really used to do that. And when did you have time to sleep? I didn't. But for me, I think once you get into the run of the show, it's a lot easier because then you're just there for like the 3 or 4 hours around the show, as opposed to like 6 or 7 or 8 around rehearsal. And it's not like, when you break it down hour-wise like that, it doesn't sound like a typical 9 to 5. It doesn't sound as like difficult or like as equivalent to like a desk job, I think, but it's a lot harder because there's a lot more emotional labor and like constant availability that's going on the stage management side.
First, in general, like what advice would you give to undergrads in order for them to like maximize their opportunities and preparations for their careers? I know you mentioned you took an apprenticeship. That's just part of like the process of becoming a stage manager, I think?
Technically, that's like a post-grad thing. Yeah, a lot of people in my class like went on to do internships or apprenticeships afterwards, but a lot of people also just like jump in and start working depending on. A lot of people try to work during school too. So like when it's, I'm not that good at networking, but it's like any of the other job, like where it's all about who you know and like the right place, right time kind of stuff. But yeah, the apprenticeship specifically is kind of like a rite of passage that's pretty like classist and is often like a barrier to, you know, more people who like look like us coming into the industry, because like I was privileged enough to do it because my parents were like, sure, you can go do this and we'll support you, because it like a lot of them don't pay well, or they're like pay to play apprenticeships. At the time that I went through the apprenticeship program, it was a stipend of $100 a month and you were housed, but yeah, your face is exactly, it was really a lot. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, oh God, why did you do that? But that is like when I was talking about it, when I was working at another company in Portland, Oregon, Children's Theater, like actors would be like, yeah, we know like how this works, but like, you know, everyone had to go through it. And I'd sit there like, just because everyone had to go through it doesn't make it okay for it to still be happening, you know, in the year of our Lord 2020, whatever. Like, so to circle back to your question of what advice I would give to undergrads to like maximize preparation for the future is like, yeah, keep in contact with almost everyone you've worked with. Because even if you didn't have a good experience on the show, people will look at your resume down the line and be like, oh, I know them, how I was working with them. And I always like skew nicer on working with them, because you don't know, like everyone knows everyone, especially like in LA and in Portland. And looser, not really career-based advice would be like to know your worth. Like in cases like the apprenticeship, you have to really think about whether this is something you want to do, because it's not only going to cost you stuff financially, it's going to cost a lot of like mental health. Like I was so sad in Portland being away from like everyone I knew, but also having a different schedule than the other apprentices in the program was really difficult for me, because it felt like this cohort was bonding without me because they were all actors or like designers with a similar schedule. And I was like at every other rehearsal without them. So knowing your worth, not only like in terms of, should I take this opportunity like financially, but also like, is like, are relationships more important to me than working? Like, are the friendships that I'll make here and the networks that I'll make here worth it to me? Like, is this where I would like to be? because otherwise, why am I devoting my time to being here? Yeah, so research things, know your worth, make friends, keep friends.
So what's the most interesting part about your job? What would you say?
Oh my God, the most interesting thing about my job to me is like everything. I love tiny little details and like having to look up weird stuff. The first show that I did in Portland that had the daytime rehearsals was like a one-man show for most of it, and then another character came in at the end. But at the very end, there was like balloons popped out of a box that had been sitting on the stage the whole time, and then balloons fell from the ceiling. So that was one of the most fun things I had to do, was just babysit balloons forever and ever, like keep all these balloons alive for a month and a half run. I have had to wrangle a surprise group of like kids in an orchestra during a show because they were running up and down the stairs in another part of the building while I was working on a really quiet and serious show. So I'm just talking about this because it's what I talked about in my last job interview, because they were like, name a time you problem solved. And I was like, once I had to tell like 60 band kids to be quiet, but like in a cool way, because they were in middle school and I was afraid of them. Talking more broadly about like stage management in general, like any stage manager you meet is going to have a cool and unique story they're like, this is why I do this. Like a lot of parts, like the minute details of the job are the same, but like the big things, like from touring to cruise ships to like regional stuff to like theater for young audiences, it's all really, really different, but it's the same kind of like, interacting with the people and like really getting to know who you work with and using like that information to like serve the production as a whole. It's a really people-based job, and I think that's something you can't really like learn or be taught from a book. It's just really like, it interests me that like many different personality types can do this job and they can all do it really well, and it's not like learned from a book.
So like this, you're the field of stage managing, right? Like, when did you find out that this was the field that you wanted to enter, sort of?
So I went into college applying for the theater major kind of because I didn't know what I wanted to do in college, and UCLA was the only school I applied to for theater, which is not a normal thing when you hear like in theater programs. Like people often will not be like, oh yeah, I only applied to one school for theater. They'll be like, I was choosing between here and NYU and Carnegie Mellon and all this stuff for performers. Excuse me. But I was a part of the backstage crew in high school, and it's one of the most fun things I did. So I was like, I might as well apply. And also like, is UCLA going to accept me? Who knows? Like I think I love to read. I'm like a smart-ish person, but it doesn't necessarily translate to my grades. So I was really surprised when I got in. But then when I got there, into this conservatory-ish kind of program, they like to market it as a BFA and a BA, which is kind of funny to me, because it's not really like super intensive for anything but acting and musical theater, I think. But I did not know what I wanted to do. And part of the graduation requirement was you have to get like production crew credit from either like working a show or like working a show like not on stage or working a show on stage. And they were really desperate for people to stage manage some student undergraduate director shows my freshman year, winter quarter. And I saw the flyer and I was like, I might as well do this. And I had no idea what I was getting into. And the department was just so busy that they were like, here, now you start rehearsal like in 3 days. And I had no idea how to do it. So sorry to those directors, because I was thrown on 2 shows back to back and I did not know what I was doing, but I had a lot of fun. And then I was like, I might as well just try to do this, but also take a class this time. So all throughout college, I really felt like I was stumbling through learning how to do my job. And then I was like, well, I guess this is what I am doing now because it's what makes me the most happy. I'm pretty good at it. I'm very good at the people aspect and the like detail oriented aspect of it, because for a lot of times in my college career, I didn't have an assistant stage manager and it was just me doing everything. So that's also not a normal way to learn how to do it. It was exhausting, and I have been looking back and going, where did all my energy go? Like, how did I have the time and when did I sleep again? But it was something that I really did just fall in love with. And then people were like, oh, we're always going to need stage managers. But when you think about the ratio of like 3 or 4 people on a stage management team to like a company of like that can go from 2 to like 60 in terms of performers versus crew, it's like, well, yes, there's always a need for, but it's also really competitive of a field because there's a lot of qualified people out there and not a lot of shows. But I fell into it, and then I learned how to do it. And then I really liked it and was like, this is something I can do. And I just I'm not really interested in learning how to do anything else is how I would sum up how I got into my career.
So the next question's a bit more culturally charged. So, there's a stereotype where like Asian gotta be like, they either be a doctor or nurse or like someone in STEM. So when you went to college for a liberal arts degree, how was your family's reaction, and were they supportive or other?
My dad once on the phone to someone or like just like in conversation with one of his friends, I think was like, yeah, she's going to theater school, but like if she doesn't like it or like if it just ends up not working out for her, she can always go back to school and like major in like something else instead, like math or something. And I was like, I don't have a math requirement. Like I barely passed AP Calc. Like I'm not going to go back to school for math. Why did you pick that as an example? Because, my dad is an engineer. And my mom majored in English when she went to school. So she also has a liberal, like a humanities degree. But my mom does this thing that I don't know that she does consciously, where she'll like attach thingy onto the ends of things that she's necessarily like enthusiastic about. It's like, I have to go pick you up from your theater thingy like after school, like that kind of a deal. I can't come up with an example for my sister because I don't think there is one. I have a younger sister. I'm the older daughter, so like there's a lot to unpack there. But I feel like that's still how she sees it a little bit. Especially because when I was a kid, the first career that I wanted to do was be a doctor. So that's going to loom over your whole life, especially I think if you're Filipino. But I think they've always been like very verbally supportive and like, let me know when you're back from rehearsal, like text me when you come home, like all this stuff. But I don't think they really understood what I did, because they've only been to, I think, 2 of my shows in LA when I was in school. And then like they came up to Portland because my mom also has family in Washington. So it's like, oh, it's on the way up there. But they came to 3 out of the 4 shows there, like once I was apprenticing, which felt like, oh, like this is my like real people job. You have to come now. So like they've been, I think, medium, pretty like not against my career as a stage manager, but like more and more as I'm like, hey, this career is not very lucrative. So I hope you enjoy claiming me as a dependent on your taxes for a little bit more. But I like, in addition to being like, I would say that like I identify primarily as a stage manager, like that's my first love in theater. But like I, over the past 2 years, have started like writing and performing my own work. I say that I've only done it twice, but that's enough to say that I've done it. And the first was at the end of my apprenticeship, because like the culmination of that program for the actors is writing and developing a solo show and performing it to like an audience there. And I think it was just like out of spite. I was like, who are you to tell me I can't also do one? And then I was like, oh no, now I have to do it. But I think they were really excited to come and like actually see me like making theater on a stage versus like something that they can't, not that they don't understand it, but it's a lot harder to be like, yeah, this is what I like to do. Is like to make like if I'm doing my job correct, you shouldn't be aware of me really doing it. as just like a regular audience member. And I think it's also a little bit hard to wrap your head around, like you being my parents, like a little bit hard to wrap your head around a career where it's like there aren't a lot of hugely visible like Asian American representation necessarily like in technical theater. I can name like a couple now because of like researching throughout the pandemic and like with all of the racial reckonings happening within the theater community and Broadway community, etc. But when I was applying to school and when I was in school, like, well, who can you name that is also doing this? It's kind of scary to go into a field where you can't be like, here's an example of a successful person who also did this, stage management specifically. So, you know, it's every day is a winding road, taking it day by day.
Going off of that a little bit, would you be able to expand upon some more of those doubts going into that field? Because I know that, especially within the liberal arts, as you were saying, for Filipinx folks, there's a lot of just kind of doubt and like things holding us back from doing that. So I was wondering if you'd be able to expand upon that a bit.
Yeah, I actually, when I was a little bit bored earlier in the pandemic, I actually like looked at some of my alumni UCLA emails that were coming through, and one was from like the Filipino Alumni Association that was like, hey, who wants to volunteer to read like scholarship essays, like to like just score them like anonymously, all this stuff. And I was like, you know, that sounds like a fun thing to do as like a volunteer. And I was never super involved in like Filipinx orgs when I was at UCLA because I didn't have time because the theater schedule is so demanding, and like college is its whole other thing of like learning curve, like how to study and like all of this stuff. And I'm just not great at writing papers, so I was always swamped, and that's like something I always wished I was involved in. So I was like, I might as well, you know, volunteer my time this way because I'm available. And I went to the training, and they were going through like, you know, you don't project your own biases, like, and the example slide was like, you know, just because it says like this person is like a this year like theater major, and like as the person who was training was like reading it, she was like, wait, I think we actually have like a theater alumni in the training right now, so like please don't feel called out by this. And I was like, yeah, that's me, lol. Like it was really funny, I think, to have them like bring that up specifically as a bullet point, to be like, you know, don't like knock people just because this is a field, this is the field that they're in. I think it's really important to pursue like doing what you love, even with the doubt. Like the doubt is always going to be there. That's just speaking for myself. Like every day I wake up and I'm like, God, I hate applying to jobs. Is this really what I should have chosen? Like all of this stuff. But remembering like how it makes me feel to like work and like to feel valued and like be like, this is what I'm doing. Like not everything is about work, but when you feel good at what you do, then like that's a win. And it's just how can I get how to get through doubt besides just sitting in it for a while and naming it and then moving on, which sounds very like meditative of me. I've been trying to get better at meditating and being mindful. But I guess that is like literally what I do. I journal a lot. I scream a lot to my sister because my sister is in STEM but has also done lots and lots of arts and humanities things in her life. So it's like, you know, there's a duality, like you can have both things. But, you know, acknowledge the scariness and don't try to pretend it's like not scary, because it is scary to like go into the liberal arts as like a Filipinx person, because you have that like, you know, like, oh, if sing karaoke for me at parties and I'll pay you, but like also you shouldn't be doing this as a career. Like that's such a weird dichotomy, I think, to encourage performing in that way, but not as a career necessarily.
The next question is, what's the most rewarding part about your job?
I feel weird about what I said earlier when like it's what I say to like just, I don't know like any of your experience in theater, but like I've just been using like very like non-theater person terms of like if I'm doing my job right, you shouldn't know that I'm doing it, because it's like, you know, as an audience member, maybe you're not going into the theater and going, wow, all of this stuff is just happening right now in front of me. It's very magic. Like obviously there's people and like stuff behind doing that, but feel very like you should in no way should being a stage manager mean like having a god complex and like using it to power trip, but it's really really fun when you like call a cue at the right moment and it just looks exactly the way the designer and the director intended it to look, and you know that it like happened really well. I don't love when problems happen during shows, but I love like quick fixing problems and being able to flex that I fixed the problem like for the rest of my life forever. I cannot come up with an example right now, but I've done it several times because like everyone who's a stage manager has, it's just part of the job. So that's really rewarding. And then also like in the interpersonal relationships vein, like knowing that you've made something better for an actor, like because you've advocated for them, or like made something better for a designer because you've advocated for them. Yeah, I love to be a person who like notates little things of like a part of the ASM track is usually like taking line notes, like if an actor says a line wrong, but you don't want to correct them in the moment, you'll just notate it, or like even if you do correct them in the moment, you notate it. But sometimes on my line notes, I like to put like, you know, you said this wrong yesterday, but you said it right today. So just like good job tacked on to another one is a like special moment for me because it was one of my first days on that show. And the actor came up and was like, I can't believe you noticed this all like on your second day. That makes me feel so special. I was like, wow, this is a very good feeling because, you know, it's nice to be told you're doing a good job. And I think the stage managers are like always appreciated like in general, but like day to day, like, hey, you're doing a good job, things like that don't often happen, I think, from people outside of your stage management team. So that's rewarding, is when you do something nice and people go out of their way to say thank you, or when you can solve problems and claim that you're a tenacious person and have it actually be happening. Love to put out fires.
And I think you touched upon this with like your doubts, but like how do you deal with like the most stressful parts of like your job? Like I stage managed once in high school for a play. That was a mess. And like yeah, I would like to learn how you would deal with like the stress of like managing all those people, I guess, and like everything that goes on with the show.
Again, to pull from another job application that I did recently, one of the questions in like the type form was like, what do like healthy boundaries mean to you? And I was like, what a fun question to have like from, it was for like an entertainment venue here in LA for like to be one of their technical, like they had like a funny word, but it was like to be an AV technician there for their shows. But I was like, that's such a great question to have on like a job application, especially for like a technical theater side, because that's not something I feel like is talked about a lot, is like healthy boundaries and what that means in the theater world. Because something I struggled with a lot in school, sure, but like in school, you're in school and everything is a trash fire. I think like you really have to learn how to manage your time. There's not necessarily healthy boundaries there because everyone is managing their time differently. So like availability is never going to be perfect in theater, in collegiate theater, or in real life theater. But I struggled a lot with setting healthy boundaries in Portland, especially like as an apprentice, because I wasn't being paid a lot, but a lot was still being expected of me. So for the majority of my apprenticeship, I didn't manage it well at all. I cried a lot, and then I was like always available, and like I didn't get to have the same like week-long break as the rest of my cohort because while A Christmas Carol was running, the next show was rehearsing. So I was going from rehearsal, leaving rehearsal early and going into like running the show. And that was really bad. And then I had a random week-long break. And I came back, or I think I took my break early actually before all of that. Like I was supposed to have taken it then, but I took it early. But I came back with like a really bad cold, but it was the first rehearsal for A Christmas Carol. And I texted the stage manager and was like, hey, like I got off a plane and I feel like very terrible. I don't want to come. And he was like, no, you should come and meet everyone. And I was like, no, I don't want to come, but like if you need me to come, I guess I will. And during the like half-hour break from that, I straight up drove home and like lay on the floor because I thought I wasn't going to come back. And then they called and were like, you have to come back. And I think that's one of the like worst moments in theater for me is like physically I was like hitting my limit after taking a week off because my body was just like readjusting to not having these crazy hours and like running around and like running a show, that it just like collapsed. But then I had to go drag my like blanketed body back into a rehearsal full of like screaming kids. So like learning from like the ways that this job has hurt me has helped me to set boundaries into making it like more fruitful. But like every day, like even when I'm not working right now and I haven't worked since like March 13th of 2020, like in a stage management role, like I have to remind myself like this is what you don't want to happen again. So like what are the steps you can take to like set these boundaries and like expectations with people. Like I don't want to have to be available to you all the time. Like I've turned off push notifications for my email on my phone, which I've been trying to keep as a habit even though I'm not working, because it's just like not healthy. And it wouldn't be expected from you. Well, like not necessarily, like my partner is in accounting and he like sometimes will have his phone ding in the middle of the night. He'll go up and check it and I just sit here and I go like that's not good. Like I get that we're early career people, but it's still like, you know, this is not just because it's always been this way doesn't mean it should have to be that way. So another thing that helps me through struggles is remember like the great things that you like about the job, set your boundaries, all this stuff. I feel like I need to like sum up everything that I rambled through like for my own head.
It's a good what's it called? Brief summary. It's a good
You graduated 2 years ago then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I entered school fall of 2014, so like expected graduation is June 2018. But I had a quarter's worth of classes left, and one of them is like the like first or second like writing requirement that you like generally would do freshman or sophomore year. I just like could not get through it.
Oh, you really
And
pushed
then
that off.
yeah, no, that's what the advisors I actually have been talking a lot about like the academic like counseling and like how it did not serve me well, because I just, you know, if you had told me freshman year that like it's not a terrible thing to like drop a class late in the quarter, like because then it won't tank your GPA and it'll be like fine, like people do late drops all the time, like that's another thing I feel like doesn't get talked about enough is like college is hard for everyone and you shouldn't feel bad because you know, you were high school smart and then like college is a whole other thing. Like one of my friends actually works in student affairs now and I don't remember what she's going to grad school for, but that's like she is a counselor who does that. And I was like, I wish you were like the counselor for TFT because like she's a really nice lady, but like she didn't tell me like almost any information that I needed to know. So like I did my apprenticeship in Portland and then I came back and then I took some summer classes that one of them went okay and then the other one did not go well. So then I went back for fall quarter in 2019 and that's when I actually graduated, technically December 2019. That's what's on my diploma. But I walked in June 2018 and it was a whole fun thing to be like, this is a lie. I should not be on this stage right now. But also, you know, if you sorry to, you know, everyone going through virtual Zoom school and my sister, like it's probably a good thing that I didn't have to do Zoom school because it was really bad for me the one time that I did do an online class. So yes, 2 years, fall 2019.
Nice. Yeah, I feel that about scheduling and stuff. I'm struggling a bit with that right now.
So would you have any like words of wisdom for like anyone who's taking like a non-traditional journey through college? Since like
Yeah, since technically like yeah, no, like that's I love to be like I actually dropped out of school because like I had to reapply, like I had to re-enroll, which is something that my advisor didn't tell me even like when I was doing it. Like I took my summer classes and I was like, hey, can I enroll in fall? Like, can you like push the buttons on the computer that like puts the like thing through? And she was like, you actually have to reapply to school. So because technically it's been like a year since you left, and then you also, you know, like moved to Oregon. And I was like, this would have been great to know when you were enrolling me in my summer classes. Like, thank you for not telling me that. It's truly like, but it was a way better experience for me to come back to school and like take the time that I needed, because I still struggled, but I felt a lot more confident in myself and like being in class, and just like I was suddenly that like old lady who was like participating every 5 seconds in one of this the GEs that I took my Scandinavian mythology class, which I really loved, which I ended up turning into a conversation between me and the professor because no one else wanted to participate. And I was like, well, screw you if you don't think I'm going to get my participation points. I'm having a good time, because I was just like, you know what? This is great. Nothing matters, which is a very funny way to look at school. But that is really how I felt after going through all of the like BS of like having to reapply to school, and then like they took me back, but then it was like, we're actually going to drop all of your classes if you don't pay your fees, and also you're classified as a non-resident because you registered to vote in Oregon, even though you like were born and raised in California. Surprise, like give us $10,000 or we drop your classes, which was very much sent me into a tailspin, and it was not good. It was like a whole lot of fun bureaucracy that I didn't know that existed inside of the UC system, or maybe just UCLA specifically, I guess. But like advice would be just like, you know, you worked hard to like get into college, like you're still working hard to be in college. Like it's very much okay to like take the extra time that you need, because it might be better for you. It was a lot better for me, because I was just taking it a lot more seriously, because I, you know, like was scared of like failing out again. Like I was subject to dismissal a lot of times throughout like my normal 4-year undergrad term, which my parents didn't really know about until like almost the end. Like I didn't tell them about all of them, but it's like it was all, my dad has had access to like all of my student records because he's like the parent on file, like with parent access. Like at any time he could have looked at it, but he just like didn't. Like he isn't really the type of person to go through and be like, so what's up with this? Which is like a weird amount of trust that they put in me, but I straight up just didn't tell them because I was afraid of what they would think. A lot of, I think not a lot of my like extended family knows that like I graduated in fall of 2019, because they all think that I walked in June 2018 and that's when I graduated, but it's not. Like there's a lot of stigma around that, and they're still just like, don't tell anyone. Like, well, it's weird for me to not talk about it, you know, like how else do you explain like why I was still like living on that side of town, or like what I was doing all day when I was there, because like I wasn't working, I was still in school. Like people thought I was still in school like to do like another degree, and I was like, no, it's still the first one. I didn't finish the first one. And like it's not, you know, at first I was really, really down about it, but now that I'm removed from it, I'm like, yeah, I finally earned my degree. Like, you know, shout out to the UCLA Theater program where C's and D's get degrees. D's are passing grades in some things, which is very funny to me. Like, just because you are taking extra time doesn't mean you're not smart, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. And this is also me pep talking myself, because this is something like I'm like, you know, it was really good for me to take the extra classes in the extra quarter and like have things be at my own pace when I finally like learn how to grow up and be a student. But yeah, no one should feel bad for being a non-traditional student. You should feel great about it actually, because it means you're cool.
Circling back to the job itself, so how many different types of jobs are there in your field, and what are they?
In my field, like in theater or like in stage management?
Let's do stage management because theater's big.
Theater is big, yeah. So there's like in a team, you'll usually have, I think, 3 or 4 people. This is speaking for like, I think most people are like, oh, Broadway stage managers. I don't. So like there will be a production stage manager, and that's like the big, like, so the important thing is that on a team, just because like there's 2 like assistant labels doesn't mean you're like an assistant. It's like how I saw that recently physician's assistants are now being like renamed to physician's associates, which I think is really cool because it sounds like a similar kind of thing of like, it's not, you're not the assistant to the stage manager if you're an assistant stage manager, it's just like a different title. So there's a production stage manager who is kind of like the bigger like person in charge, even though they're not like the big boss, like, and they're the assistants are not assistants, but the PSM does like most of the paperwork and like most of the schedules. I think sometimes it will fluctuate from like show to show and team to team and company to company. So this is just based off of my experience. And then the assistant stage manager is like more hands-on and like into like handling the things that go on stage and like keeping track of like goings on there, like taking notes for lines, taking notes for like blocking, prop tracking, costume tracking, etc. And then the PA, the production assistant, will like do more of the same, but like other stuff. Like the work can be split pretty evenly, and there's no like one right way to do it. But those are the 3 kind of slots. I like to PA at ASM just because I like to have my hands on things and like get a feel for like the temperature backstage of like how are things going today, like this is what we need to do to make things run smoother on this end, and reporting back and being like, let's all talk about this. I was going to say I haven't PA'd much, but like technically on paper I was the PA for the like first and only big musical that I've done here. Because like with the way that the unions work, I'm not in a union because I am too baby right now, and I also wouldn't be able to afford the union dues right now because I like don't work that often, and that's like more competitive, and like for like later in your career your union card happens or doesn't happen depending. But like for that show I was like the intern, so I didn't really get paid again, but it was like a better like life experience, and it was also really short, and I was still taking classes, so I was like, this is fine. But I was technically the PA on that, even though I was filling more of an ASM role, because the equity ASM was like the co-producer, and he wasn't really doing the work, he was just taking the contract to like have someone on contract, and also so like he could get paid for like his other role on the show because it was his company, which I think is very funny and bureaucratic and political. So that spiraled off into something else, but those are generally the 3 roles within stage management.
So what was your first interview after graduation like? What advice would you give to current undergrad students to effectively present themselves to employers? Like, what's
my God. I'm still like going through that. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. That's a very, okay, sorry. Can I hear the question again and not interrupt you this time?
No. You interrupted me at the end. So so let me say it again. What was your first interview after graduation like? What advice would you give to current undergrad students to effectively present themselves to employers? It's hope you don't get like flashbacks or anything.
Almost like, oh my God, I don't know. What was my first interview after graduation? Like I interviewed for Like I interviewed for my apprenticeship, but that wasn't technically like it's a post grad-ish opportunity. Um, so that ended up, I wasn't sure if that phone interview, it was over the phone, and it was with the production manager who like then would have been, who like was my boss. Um, but I didn't know, I have a history of going into interviews and not knowing what kind of interview they're going to be, which is why I was bothering you so much, Ethan, about like what kind, is it informal? Like, do I have to wear fun clothes? Like all this stuff. Um, because I have gone to several like formal interviews thinking that they were like informal. So I was just like, I don't know what to expect. And no one like, it's not for lack of trying to find out. I just, no one would tell me, slash, no one knew, which is really funny. But that phone interview was super informal. And it actually like was supposed to be the call of her telling me like, hey, we would like to offer you the position. But it was just like, walk me through all like your career and stuff. It was like more of a getting to know you call. And at the end, she was like, wait, I didn't actually offer you the like apprenticeship. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was so stressed this whole time. Like I'm at the Starbucks, I'm next to the road, like, ah. But with all of my interviews, I've tried to, like, because theater and stage management specifically is such like, I think a personality field that like, clearly I struggle a little bit with maintaining professionality. Like I can do it. It's really, really hard for me though, especially when I'm talking about things I'm passionate about. I will just start to go. um, but like I've always been very myself in interviews, which this doesn't really necessarily work for like non-theater, like super professional, like office jobs, like career, like what have you. I don't know what I've been trying to not call them like normal people jobs. It's like, sure, I'm not a normal person, but like I don't want to get into the like continue the habit of like putting down my field in that way. Like this is what's normal for me. Like I've switched to calling my resumes theatrical and non-theatrical, and not theatrical and like normal resume, or just a resume. Like this is my job. Like why am I doing that? So I've always been very much myself in interviews. Um, I've been I try to hype myself up a lot before going into things, like to effectively present yourself to an employer is like, I have to consciously be like, don't talk badly about yourself. Like here are all the nice things that you want to talk about. Here are all your skills, all of this stuff. But like to have some personality. And one of the things that I like to say about myself in interviews is like, I will make mistakes and I will do things very, very wrong. But something that boss told me is like, we were like in the middle of a really long work week. And she just looked at me and was like, you messed this thing up. And I was like, yeah. And then I like fixed it. And she was like, yeah, but that's what I like about you is like you don't make such a big deal about when you like screw things up. Like you acknowledge it and you're like, I won't do it again. Like this is what I'll, like, and then you just move on. And then later you'll be like, this is how I'll fix the problem. And I was like, this is so funny because in my head I've been like spinning out about that since it happened, 4 hours ago. But I guess I am very calm about when I make mistakes, but I'm very open about being like, hey, I set this, I created this tiny fire. Like, I'm really sorry. This is what I'm doing to fix it. So I always like to bring that up in interviews and be like, this is one of like the major accolades I've received in my life. It's not an award, but like my boss being like, you're good at acknowledging and moving on from your mistakes, like outwardly. And I was like, inwardly, no, inwardly, very much no. I'm still thinking about, things that I did wrong 6 years ago, LOL. But I'm good at balancing that with like my work life. So like maybe that's a whole separate issue to be like, oh no, why are you still doing that? And projecting this calm, but like it's good for the group.
Going off on that, like, is there anything else that like you have learned in your post-grad life that you wish you'd known like earlier?
Yeah, specific to my life, before I left for Portland, people were like, wow, Portland is going to be so great for you. It's such a fun city, like all this stuff, all the nature, all the food. But like Portland is overwhelmingly like white liberal. Like together, like it's populated with like well-meaning white liberal people, which is its own kind of exhausting and grating to navigate as like, you know, a non-white person. And I didn't expect that, period, but I didn't expect that like to take such a heavy toll on me. Like I've, you know, seen my fair share of othering, but like I was privileged to grow up in like a suburb of the Bay Area where like there's always just been like Filipino friends and family around, like all this stuff. And then to have the culture shock of moving to Portland was really hard. So that's, I think, when I really started coming into my own like identity and being like, what does it mean to me to be like a Filipinx person? What does it mean to be like a Filipinx stage manager? What does it mean to be like often the only like person who looks like me in a room, the youngest person, like all of these different intersectional identities. So it's not necessarily like I wish I had known that Portland was so white and how it would affect me, but I wish I had known then like what I would be like now, and like how strong I've had to like turn myself in, like how strong of a person I've had to like turn myself into, to go through that, but also that like, you know, I could pick up and like, you know, if something is not serving me, like I can leave, I think is really big lesson, really big thing that I wish I had known at the beginning. One of my apprentice friends like actually left for like other reasons, one of them being like, why do we get paid $100 a month and we have to do all of these things? It's really hard. And you know, I don't want to like talk about her personal stuff because it was her stuff, but like the toll that it took on the rest of us when she left was a big reason why I was like, oh my God, I can't leave, because then like what will they do? But like really, like what did I owe them? Like I wasn't getting paid a lot was being expected of me. The relationship and networking aspect is important, but like the trade-off was not enough. And I think given the choice, I maybe would not have gone through that program again. Except like all of the choices led me to where I am. I also wish I knew that there's just a lot of stuff, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't know. Like there's a lot of barriers to the theater industry of like how to interview properly and like what a good and bad resume, like just like professional career stuff that wasn't in the theater program that like a lot of people came in knowing and then a lot of people didn't, me included. Yeah, I kind of wish I had known how exhausted I was going to be, being like the only representation of myself that I could see for like a year and a half. It's really hard. And I called my dad like after one of the first like microaggression incidents when I was like driving, and he was kind of just like, yeah, like I've been through things like that too. And it was one of those weird moments of like humanizing your parents and realizing that they've like lived whole lives before you knew them, etc. And me just being like really depressed about like the state of the world and like diaspora stuff. A lot is the summary of that answer. I wish I'd known a lot, but I'm also like, you know, I would not have ended up here. It's like Doctor Strange, one outcome. Like this is the one outcome. I guess I had to go through all of the stuff, but.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of really good advice. So to add on to this conversation, in hindsight, is there any major setback you faced before that you are now thankful for? Sort of like, is there a mistake that helped you grow stronger, or yes, anything in general from your field that has made you grow stronger?
I'm trying to think of like big, like in my career, it would kind of be like moving to like the amount, like the lowest depression that I felt, I think in Portland would be like a big one, because from that I think I had to learn resilience, because it was pretty bad when I was sad and like not hanging out with like my friends there or here, like I hadn't seen my family in a while, the sun hadn't come out in months, and just being like, well, if I have gone through this, like I can go through a lot of other stuff, or like having to go back to school and deal with all of my own like inner like thoughts and stuff about like what does this mean about like who I'm worth, like what I'm worth as a person, like am I tied to like my GPA when I like it's UCLA, like the standards are so high, like the culture is so competitive, like but everyone is struggling in that way. Like reframing it that way has really helped. There's been like some stuff that I went through like at, it's funny to say at past points in my career because like I'm 24, like I haven't been working for that long, but it is like, you know, it's not like long, but it's broad or whatever the saying is.
Well, from what you've said already, it seems like it's a lot in just like a
yeah,
couple of
like
years.
yeah, it has. I think it's just because I've been like removed from it a little bit. And I'm like, I haven't done that much, but I like it's been a lot. Like, and I shouldn't discount my own work in that way again. Like kind of like the normal and theatrical, like theater resumes and stuff. But there is a like I have a specific story about like I went to this networking event put on by like the group is called Broadway and Beyond Access for Stage Managers of Color, and it's put on by like three like super cool like reputable like they're all like they've been like I don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's like these old guys like have been working or they've been around forever, because like, you know, like they have, but that's like a rude way to put it. But they're all like these very cool like three Black stage managers who have been working on Broadway for forever, and some of them have always been stage managers, but one of them like was a dancer and then she pivoted when she was 30, which is so cool. But they like formed this group sometime last year, and this is like the second networking event that I've been to from them, and I think that's really cool. But I didn't know that this one was going to be it was kind of like this, but it's like me, not like versus other people, but I didn't know that I was going to be the only one groomed, because at the previous event it had been like 12 like stage managers from like my group was like the early career groups, like 12 of like me, like various people, and like also like 12 industry professionals, like people with hiring power, not necessarily production managers, but like higher ups at like theaters from all across the country who are donating their time to do this. But, you know, obviously a lot of them are going to be white, but like the first event ended up being like two people in our group asking the same questions of all of these people. So I was surprised when I came into the Zoom and it was just me and then like five like producers, like associate artistic directors, like directors of production, and I was like, oh no, like they all have my resume, all of this stuff, and one like the moderator kind of was just like, what questions do you have for them? And I was like, well, I didn't know it was going to be this way, but I kind of had the same kind of like effort attitude of being like, well, I'm never going to see some of these people ever again, like I might as well ask them like big questions. So one of the questions that I'd asked was like, hey, this was like a month or so after like the hate crimes in Atlanta, and so it's like, you know, Asian like hate crimes against Asians has been like skyrocketing recently, like all this stuff, but like only like I think 4 out of the 6 theaters like on their Instagrams or like on their homepage, like I went through and I vetted like the list of the people because they told me who was going to be there beforehand. I didn't know it was just going to be like me and all of them, but I like was like, hey, I'd like to ask like you, this artistic director specifically of this theater, like why you haven't said anything. And then the whole time I was saying it, I was freaking out because I was like, I am very much not used to being in like the position of power in the room Even though I have like positional power as a member of the stage management team, like I like carry all these identities, none of whom have been like historically like the person in power, which like the dynamic is still there in a rehearsal room of like people won't ask me for things even though I'm part of the stage management team. They'll like ask a more senior person, etc. But the only reason that I felt bold enough to ask that question was because like I was tired of institutions not supporting me, and I wanted to be like, hey, like what, like who am I, like who am I to want to come to your company if you're not going to do the very bare like performative minimum, you know? Because like that's a whole other issue, is like performative posting, etc. But like it's not that hard to like link back to someone else's resources, because if you look at the area you're in, it's not like you don't have an Asian community. Like sure, they're not your target audience necessarily, financially, or like for what, well, yeah, financially, because like theater's a business, but like why would you expect people to show up for you if you're not going to show up for them? And then I started crying because I was stressed out. And then another nice like director of production was like, well, what do you expect of a theater when you come in, not just to work, but like at the beginning, like to interview, like what are things that you as like a young female, like stage manager of color, like Asian American, like Filipinx American, like what do you want? And I was like, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Like, so that's when I've had to think about like big, not necessarily like setbacks like that were my fault, but like traumas and stuff that have happened to me, like microaggressions, like sexual harassment, like all this stuff is what I brought up and was like, here, like I didn't like lay out all of my trauma to them, but like here are like the base like things of like what has happened to me. Like what I expect is like, who do I go to when this happens? Like I need a support system, like because previous like institutions have failed me, and like this, here's what I'm supposed to go to. Like it was a room of regional theaters, and the moderator was like, well, any regional theater should have an HR department. And I was like, what if I've been through that and it's failed me? Not necessarily because of like all of my identities, but because it's just broken to begin with. But if like, not to be like those things made me who I am, but like I wish I hadn't had to do it at all. But now that like I wish I'd like not had these traumas at all, but now that I have, like this is how it's going to inform me moving forward. Like it's kind of a jaded attitude to have, but it's like, this is what I've been through. This is what I need from you. Like here are my access needs. Like this is what I need. So I can not just like work here, but thrive here, because I shouldn't be miserable while I'm working. So that's I think how I would sum up that question. It had to be like in the context of the conversation, because that's like the closest thing I've come to working like throughout the pandemic is these networking events, where I've had to practice like being myself and like making professional connections, etc. But like I would not have known how to advocate for myself like that before, much less to like strangers. It was I'm still thinking about doing that and like whether or not I should have done it, because standing up to authority figures or like asking for my needs are not something I was culturally raised to do. So learning to do that, learning to advocate for myself and like for other people, for the betterment of things for me, but for everyone, I guess, is really important, and something I wouldn't have learned had I not gone through a lot of sad things that I wish I hadn't in the past.
So that was a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm so sad you had to go through all of that.
Me too. But thank you. Thank you for listening. I tried not to go into specifics, because specifics can be like hard, and like, especially when you don't practice with them or like have the correct like Africa or whatever they go through. So I don't want to go into it.
It's okay. We don't. And yeah, another time. So this is our last formal question. I think you answered a bit of it before though, but I'll say it. Were you ever in a position where you had to put yourself out there? Have you ever been turned down? if so, what's your advice on getting back up?
I mean, a lot of it recently, like there have been like, you know, 2 new classes graduating during like the field is becoming oversaturated with like really talented and qualified people. And now we're all just like, give us the work, where is the work? Like, and it's a lot more competitive. So I feel like for a lot of like any job, it's like hard to like apply for a lot of jobs and like continually get rejected. And the offer that I just got actually was first a rejection because they were like, we really jived with you. Like we had a good time during the interview. I did not have a good time during the interview. It was really stressful and really short. And they talked for like half of it, like literally half of it was just them talking at me. And then I was like, I really have to concentrate on making my answers short to these questions. And I like couldn't quite do it. And then they were like, actually, we're out of time. And now we have to go right into our other one. And I was like, oh God, this didn't go well. And then they were like, you know, we're not able to offer you a position at this time, but we're going to like ramp up. Hopefully, like if there's demand for the show, so we'll get back to you then. And then they did just get back to me, and then they haven't replied to my email to that reply. So now I'm nervous again that they're gonna be like, actually, no, we don't want you anymore. But like, it sucks that the advice is just like, you know, keep going because it's hard. Like I go through days of apply, like cold emailing a lot of people, and then like weeks of like not doing anything at all because I'm like, it's not my fault that there's like a global pandemic and that my field is not existent. Like it is not my fault that like my computer physically can't handle like trying to run virtual shows, and so I can't like put myself in for those. Like it's, you know, sometimes life happens and it's hard, but like focus on the things that you can control, like keep going. And then if you're like me, spiral out on the floor about whether or not you pick the right career, and then go back to like going. Me creating my own work has also been part of that like struggle and whether or not to get back up. But I think like if you get knocked down, it is okay to like sit on the floor for a little bit and collect yourself, but you do have to get back up.
Okay. Well, that's all of the questions that we have. Well, at least what we prepared for. So, but I don't want to end it on like a somber note. So, so I don't know. So, what have you been doing lately, other than
lately? Yeah, other than applying for jobs. Well, my friend is one of my best friends is actually like a assistant to like a person in the like celebrity person in the entertainment industry, and like is what I'm going to after this actually is like I get hired from time to time to like be like a third assistant person who does things that they can't quite do, or like if they're busy doing other things, like I help pick up the slack then. And it's paid and it's fun and it's like cool, and I'm like under an NDA, which is also fun because I like love to break my NDA to my mom because I know it's not going to go anywhere. To be like, oh, I was at X celebrity's house today, and she's like, I don't know who that is, and I'm like, well, I can't tell anyone else, so like enjoy this information. So it's like it's fun to be like, oh yeah, sometimes I'm a Hollywood assistant, because like really I'm not, like really I'm making UPS labels and then like delivering books that have to go out on time because we just launched a book. And I have also been hanging out with my housemate's dog, who she decided to get the day before Labor Day, with like not really any consultation with any of the rest of us, but now the dog's my BFF, so that's fun. But I'm like excited about this new job that I'm hopefully maybe going to have, and it's also going to be very small because I did say 1 to 2 shifts a week to start, and I was like, well, that's depressing, but they're only doing like 3 days of shows, like it's just Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so it's like not that big of a deal, especially because things aren't really opening yet here, at least. But I'm also in a book club with people that I've met on the internet, and they're mostly Canadian, and a lot of them are librarians, so it's fun to be in a book club full of people that read lots of cool stuff.
Canadian? Do they
Yeah.
exist? Are you sure
I
it's
don't know,
real?
yeah, every Sunday, I come in and I'm like, oh yeah, all of you guys are sitting in the snow. That sucks. It's not snowing there anymore, but like in the past, that was fun. And they get mad at me for going to the beach. So like every week they threaten to kick me out of book club because it's not warm there yet. So I think that's fun. I have one of my solo works is actually in a gallery right now, so like I'm being publicly perceived at any point in time, which is really scary. But like I took a class from East West Players last year at the beginning of the pandemic, that was about like developing solo work. And then there was this gallery that was like, oh, for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and like Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to create like a curated group show of like women and Asian women and like non-binary people to like, what's your work that's like about becoming free of like white gays, male gays, like all stuff. Like, what's the stuff that you've made that's like just for you and like us? And I was like, oh, my show about my mom would probably be cool to submit. And I very much was like, here, have this, and expecting them to like reject it. But they were like, yeah, be a part of our gallery show. So now my face is on a screen in a gallery here in LA for 10 minutes with some other video works, which is very fun to think about. But that opened last weekend and we went to it and I was like, wow, look, it's me in a museum. That's crazy. So that's what I've been up to.
Sounds really cool.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you for being on this.
My podcast now, because I've talked so much, you legally have to give it to me.
I mean, you did talk for like 90% of it.
Oh, God.
But yeah, a lot of what you said was really informative, and I think it's going to help some people out here in Davis. So thank you so much for being on our show, on our podcast, and I hope to see you again later.